people, I think we're going to record it. Yeah. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher
Kechanu
Torah. All right. Well, again, my apologies to those people who are not here, and my apologies to you for us starting late, for not being able to send out the link. I'm going to share my screen with all of you so we can jump in. Share. I think this is it. Can you see the thing that says Torah for today?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So first off, it's been a while since I've been with you. I don't know why it's been so many weeks, but I've certainly missed teaching you all and missed learning from you. So I'm glad I'm back with you today. We are looking at Vayigash, and Vayigash is the story of, it's the conclusion of the very long 3-episode story of Joseph and his brothers. And we open the Torah portion today with Judah stepping forward and doing the best that he can to try to convince Joseph, who he doesn't know is his brother, to not keep Benjamin. Because if you remember, Joseph says that he's going to keep Benjamin, and he obviously is traumatized by that because of the experiences and the promises that he made to his father. So there's about to be a reconciliation, but before the reconciliation, there's this very long speech that Judah gives that breaks open Joseph's heart. And that's when Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. So here's a piece of the speech that I want to share with you. A piece of it. It is, Ki avdecha arav et hana'ar me'im avi lemor im lo avienu elecha v'chatati le'avi kol hayamim. So he says, now your servant has pledged himself for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, I shall stand guilty before my father forever. So this is Judah saying about Benjamin to Joseph that he promised his father, who allowed Benjamin to go only on condition that Judah swore and made a vow to him that he would bring him back safely to the land of Israel. And now Joseph wants to throw Benjamin in prison. Why? Because he found the goblet on Benjamin's bag, right? I'm not saying, hopefully everybody knows the story.
Yeah.
And Judah's begging him to not do this. All right, that's where we stand. So before we jump into the commentary, and I have 2 comments that I brought on this verse. Is there anything in this verse that you see, that you notice, that you want to just, that catches your eye about this verse? No. Okay.
No.
All right, then let's jump into the commentary. Oh, Jack, yeah, go ahead.
It's just translation or what, but the syntax of what he says is a little strange. He says, if I do not bring him back to you, i.e. to his father, right? That's what he's saying. If I do not bring him back to you, Jacob, I, Judah, shall stand guilty before my father forever. Why doesn't he say before you forever?
Yeah, because it's a formal way, because in biblical parlance, you wouldn't refer to your parent as a you. Oh, but he does. If I don't bring him back to you, he
Right.
doesn't first, but you're right. That's obvious. You're right. I never actually noticed that. It should be, if I don't bring him back to you, I shall stand guilty before you forever. That's true.
Right.
That is the way the verse would normally run. But maybe I'd have to go back and look at the text of when he originally made that pledge to see what the language is there. Now I'm curious. Now I'm very curious, Jack. He made that pledge last week. He says it's chapter 23, and he says to him, Judah said to his father Israel, send the boy in my care and let us be on our way that we may live and not die. You and we are our children. I myself will be surety for him. You may hold me responsible if I do not bring him back to you and set him before you. I shall stand guilty before you forever. So that it's only you. So I guess what Judah's doing here is he's reiterating the relationship so that Joseph maybe will feel moved, because when he says my father, he's maybe appealing to Joseph as a father and what that would feel like for him to, you know, and maybe that's why the language is that way, because it's an appeal to his emotions as a father.
Do you think that maybe Judah knows who Joseph is? I know that's what the story doesn't say that, but
I don't think so.
okay.
I don't think so. I think he's really that, anything's a possibility, but it would really undermine the moment of Judah stepping forward in this way. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I just looked at the Fox translation,
Yeah.
and so that's verse 32. Let's see. No, it's the same way. If I do not bring him back to you,
Yeah.
I will be
Chatati
culpable
la'avi.
for sin against my father for all the days to come.
Yeah, it's exactly. V'chatati la'avi kol hayamim. I will sin against my father for all my future days. So I think it's an appeal to Joseph's heart. That's what I think. Kathleen.
Kind of concerns me because it continues the same dynamic of favorite sons. Judah's grown up. He's done a lot of good things despite some of the lesser things. And yet, okay, Judah's exchangeable. And and it's the same dynamic as with Joseph.
Well, but
and he said Jacob's not learning. And
I don't think I disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. Because Judah's the one who makes the offer. He's the one who says, I put myself in harm's way. Jacob doesn't make that decision. Jacob isn't the one who's playing favoritism. Jacob is just it's his youngest child. And while it's true that he may have favoritism towards his youngest child because he's the only son left of Rachel, it's Judah's the one who says, right?
but his father accepts it.
Yeah, I guess so. You're right. But that's Jacob could have said, I love each one of you and I don't want to lose any of you.
Yeah.
And he doesn't do that. It's true. Well, like we already know that these characters are flawed. They're not perfect. We know that for sure. And we know that Jacob has lived a life that's filled with flaws.
That's true.
Okay, there's a word in the Hebrew that is going to be the jumping off point for the commentary that Rabbi Abraham of Sakachu uses. And the word in the Hebrew is the third word in the verse.
I got it.
Right here. It's this word. Ki avdecha arav et hanar. The Hebrew word arav is one that Rabbi Abraham is interested in and commenting on. And the question is, what does that word arav mean? What
Yeah.
is it all
Yeah.
about? George, you have something you want to
Yeah,
share?
it's often used a pledge, like okay, like a pawn thing for modern terminology. You leave something on deposit.
Good.
Okay,
Okay,
that's
so it's a pledge of surety. So
well,
basically,
he left his kids, his family.
yeah, so Judah's saying, I should be the pledge instead of
Pledge.
Benjamin.
Yeah.
That's the most shot, simple definition of that word, arav.
Hmm.
But we're going to see in a minute that it takes on greater significance in the mind of our Hasidic rabbis. So what does Rabbi Abraham of Sakhachu say? He says, Judah took responsibility for Benjamin even in the instance of duress. But what good did it do Jacob that Judah accepted this degree of obligation? More, if Judah is actually powerless to save his brother, what good would come of his vow, which would deny him the benefits of both this world and the next? What is Rabbi Abraham saying here? Judah took responsibility for Benjamin in an instance of duress, but what good did it do for Jacob?
Yeah.
Judah accepted this degree of obligation.
Yeah.
In other words, he's asking the question.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on one second, George.
Yeah.
What he's asking is there any power to Judah's proclamation whatsoever?
Yeah.
Or is he making a vow that he made to his father that he has no power whatsoever in keeping?
Yeah.
Right? Because again, what Jack's question earlier
Yeah.
took us back to last week's Torah portion, and I'm going to read it to you again. Judah says to his father, send the boy in my care and let us be on our way. I myself will be surety. Same word, arav. I will be surety. I will make sure. I vow you can hold me responsible if I do not bring him back and set him before you. And so Rabbi Abraham is saying, how could Judah have made that vow in the first place?
Yeah.
He is powerless before Joseph. In what way could he have ever created that vow? And when he now shares that vow with Joseph, what power does he have? Joseph could do whatever he wants to do. How could you make a vow where you have no control over the vow that you're making? Okay, George.
Yeah, well, it's in some ways it's illogical because Jacob is bemoaning, he's lost a kid and then this and that. So why would he want to kill more of his family? In other words, if Judah didn't fulfill it, okay, kill your grandkids. I mean.
Okay, but that may be true, but that really would have been the conversation that Jacob could have had with Judah in last week's Torah portion.
Okay.
Jacob could have said to Judah, you know what? I don't want you to make a vow because I don't want to lose anybody, let alone Benjamin. But the vow was already made. His comment, Rabbi Abraham's comment is, how do you make the vow in the first place? This is not about Jacob. This is about Judah. How does Judah get off making a vow that he does not have power to fulfill? I vow that, I'm going to say something like, I vow that I'm going to give each member of HAMAKOM $500 back by the end of the year.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Sounds great, right? How can I make that vow? What power do I have to enact that vow? Right? I vow that, this person is not going to be president of the United States in 2024. Right? I have no power to make such a vow. So Judah makes this vow to his father I vow to make sure that I will bring Benjamin back, or I will be the one who stays there forever. What power does he have to make that vow, Kathleen?
I think he does. I think he's making it from a sense of atonement. And it's not really for his father as much as it is for himself. That I'm not going to make the same mistakes that I made earlier. I'm going to be more observant. I'm going to be better. I'm not going to let the same thing happen. If I'm in that same circumstance, I'm going to do it differently. And that's atonement. And I think that's what he's kind of saying to Jacob.
That's really beautiful. I love that. In other words, the vow is not out loud to Jacob. It's to himself, you're saying. He's saying that I will go to the mat. I will risk my life. I will do anything I can to save my brother, unlike the first time when instead of saving my brother, I sold him into slavery forever. Very nice. Eileen.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think he's doing it out of guilt because he couldn't stop his brothers from doing what they did. And so
Right.
he has this guilt, and I think that's why he makes this promise or vow to his father.
Great. Love it. Rabbi Abraham is going to offer a different suggestion. And it's an interesting suggestion. He says, the answer is that we are endowed with hidden power, of which even we ourselves are ignorant. Should we engage these forces, we are sometimes able to do more than we ever imagined. If Judah had not taken upon himself this degree of responsibility, even in the case of duress, he would not have endeavored so strenuously to save Benjamin. He would only have done what appeared to him he had the power to do. So what Rabbi Abraham is suggesting is, if Judah hadn't risked making such a foolish vow to his father back in Canaan before they went down to Egypt, he would not have worked so hard in the moment to try to convince Joseph to take him in place of Benjamin. That's what Rabbi Abraham is saying. But he's saying something also equally fascinating. He's saying, perhaps each one of us has a tendency to underestimate the abilities that we have to manage incredibly difficult people and situations. We do not hold ourselves in high enough regard when it matters most. Because we believe maybe we can't do what we think we can or what we want to do. We don't give ourselves credit. And he's suggesting the way around that, the way in which we really can test our inner resilience and our strength, is to put ourselves in a position through a vow where we have no choice but to step up to the plate. I'm going to give you a different example. So let's say you are a relief pitcher for the LA Dodgers. And the score is tied 8-8 in the ninth inning. And the bases are loaded. And you say to your manager, put me in. I guarantee I will not give up a run.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what kind of guarantee is that? You know you can't make such a guarantee. Bases are loaded. There's no outs. You're going up to pitch against the number one hitter on the opposing team, and you say to the manager, I guarantee I will not give up a hit. Who in their right mind would do that? That's what that's what Judah was doing with Jacob. But now you're the pitcher who goes in there. You've just made that guarantee. What happens to you internally in that moment? You've just guaranteed to the manager that you're not going to give up a hit. You're likely going to pitch the best you've ever pitched. You're going to dig deep, and you're going to go out there and you're going to prove to yourself and to your manager and to the whole world that you were right. But imagine if you say to the manager, bases loaded, 9th inning, no outs. I think I could get up there and strike them out. I'm not certain, but I'll do the best job that I can. And then you go out there and you give up a hit. Right? It's not, it's about how you hold yourself accountable in those moments. Does that make sense? Does that analogy work?
Mm.
And so I guess the question that Rabbi Abraham is inviting us to think about is, when, if ever, do we do that? When, if ever, do we hold ourselves to that kind of position where we would be willing to make a guarantee for something else and then push ourselves to make sure it happens? Or never? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Can you think of a time where you pushed yourself beyond what you were even ever thought capable of doing, and then rose to the occasion and were so darn proud of yourself because you pushed yourself to rise to the occasion? And on the flip side, can you think of a moment where you kind of were too wishy-washy on yourself and you didn't really push yourself in the way that you could have, and you didn't succeed because you didn't push yourself? Right? That, I think, is what's going on here. That's the invitation that Rabbi Abraham is inviting us to think about ourselves. What do you think? Yeah, Rob.
The issue that I have with both your analogy and with the promise that was made is that there's an illusion that you're under total control of the situation. In your analogy, for example, let's say the pitcher gets a sign from the catcher that, or the manager, that he's supposed to throw a fastball when in fact he thinks a curveball should be thrown. So he throws the fastball and the guy blasts it into the left field pavilion. You know, you don't have total control. You can't say, I'm going to give up a hit. I'm not going to give up a hit because there are other factors. You know, you could have a situation also where someone hits a regular ground ball and it gets by an infielder, and yeah, it's not a hit technically, but you've lost the game. So you can't make that guarantee.
You're absolutely right. I love, Rob, you're pushing back on that. We do not have full control over all of the forces around us. And if that's the case, then why ever make that kind of vow? Like, we'd be stupid to do that when we know we don't control every outcome in a particular situation. And yet Judah did do just that. He did say to the manager, I guarantee nobody's going to get a hit off of me. And he had no control over Joseph. He had no control over the situation, yet he did it anyways. So I agree wholeheartedly with you, Rob. And yet we're confronted by a situation in the Torah where somebody ignored the logic of it and still made the vow? Kathleen?
Hmm. It was because, in a sense, it was a life and death situation. It was famine. He could do nothing, and they would all die. And he even mentioned, I don't know whether it was last week or this week, he mentioned so that all of our children and grandchildren won't starve. I think he saw that there was a greater picture and that you have to push when there's a greater picture. There wasn't just Benjamin's life at stake. In his eyes, it was his whole family's, and it was all of his brothers' families. And so he said, I'm going to vow to do the best I can. It may not work, but I'm going to do that extra push to find that hidden power, because I really like that notion that there is a hidden power, that we know that there are times we have to do that extra push.
You know, your comment reminds me, Kathleen, of those rare stories of people who find inordinate physical strength in a moment of great danger. You know, the person who lifts the car up off the leg of a child. How did they possibly ever lift the car up? In any other circumstance, they would never be able to lift that car. But somehow in the moment, their adrenaline, right, causes them to have this superhuman strength.
Yeah.
And so it again, it's those external forces that push us sometimes to respond in ways that even we are shocked that we were able to respond.
Well, and I think if we see God as exerting power to protect us, then in imitation of God and in protecting the other sparks of divinity, we have to push to protect others. And that's what he was doing. I mean, he was teaching us a lesson about putting yourself out there to take care of your siblings, that sense of responsibility for others. It's been reinforced at different times. But that he learned Noah's lesson. Noah didn't care enough about community. He's caring about Benjamin. He's caring about Jacob. He's caring about the families of his brothers and his own. I think he's pushing that sense of I'm gonna take all the responsibility that I can possibly muster to help.
Good.
God does.
You hold on one second, George. You remind me actually of Abraham standing up to God during Sodom and Gomorrah, or Moses standing up to God after the golden calf. In what realm of human relationship could one imagine ever saying to God, as Moses did, you want to kill them? Then write me out of this book. I want nothing to do with it. If that is not a chutzpahdik thing to say to God Almighty, right? If Abraham could go up to God and negotiate with him from 50 to 40 to 30 to 20 to 10 to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think those are examples equally of people who are unwilling to say, my power is limited.
Right.
They approach this and they say, my power is limitless. And again, to Rob's comment, imagine if the pitcher called in all of the infielders and said, I made a guarantee to our manager that I would not give up a hit, and leave it at that. And all those other players now internalize that and say, if he made a guarantee, I am going to play my best that I've ever played to make sure not to let a ball go through my legs. And it elevates the entire team in that moment. George.
Yeah, well, the word, what is it? I will have sinned, v'chatati. I looked it up in the dictionary. It can mean to sin, but it can also mean to incur guilt or to miss. So it's a little, see, when I saw the word sin, okay, it's like eating pork. It's like, disobeying one of the commandments. And, I had trouble connecting okay, I'm gonna do my best and then, you know, disobeying commandment, but it can be a looser interpretation. And when you interpret it, you got to put a word, okay, sin, you know, but still it's not quite, you know.
I definitely agree with you that the verse more likely is read the way that you're just describing it, the way that you are understanding the emphasis that Judah makes.
Yeah.
It's not a life or death situation. But
Yeah.
Rabbi Abraham isn't interested in reading it the way that you read it, George. He really wants to push the envelope. He really wants to invite us to think about how we view ourselves. That's the way he's reading it. And I find it to be a fascinating read, right? Because if you look at the questions, to consider, look at question number 2. Have you had an experience that would confirm the assertion of Rabbi Abraham that we are endowed with powers beyond our imagination? It's not a question that I normally think about for myself. I don't think it's a question that most of us think about normally for ourselves. But I think it's a fascinating question to contemplate. Do we sell ourselves short? Right? In all sorts of moments in our life. Should we ever sell ourselves short? We are endowed with strengths and capabilities that sometimes we're not willing to admit to ourselves. We are in the image of God. And that gives us powers beyond what we normally accept for ourselves on a daily basis. Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And I think when we read this section, we kind of look at it as being a little arrogant because of this issue that we've been talking about whether you can control a situation by yourself. But I think your interpretation is really I think it is great. I think we do undersell ourselves. We do say, oh, well, I can't do that. And instead of approaching a situation and saying, I think I can do this. It's a fine line.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I really love that. There is a fine line between overconfidence and arrogance, or confidence and arrogance, and it's one that we have to walk carefully. I want to go back and reread the whole story and look at it in light of what you just said, Rob. Is Judah being arrogant when he says to his father, hey, Pops, don't worry, I promise you I'm going to bring Benjamin back? Like, is that arrogance? Is it overconfidence? Is it foolishness? What is it? And I think it could be read in all of those ways. Rabbi Abraham is reading it as, one of trusting oneself to rise in a moment's occasion in ways that one doesn't think one is capable of rising. I think about it, Rob and everybody else, the way that Israel is fighting against Hamas, and the way individual soldiers are risking their lives to do the kinds of things they're doing in Gaza to rid this world of evil. And like, if I'm an individual soldier going in there thinking like, I don't know, I may get, walk into a booby trap and risk my life and die, versus I'm going in there and I'm going to kill Sinwar and I'm going to come out a hero. The way I go in there is a lot based upon what the story is that I tell myself about my own capabilities. And, I would want us to engage more often in elevating our qualities as opposed to, minimizing our capabilities without, as you said, Rob, without that arrogance. Yeah, go ahead.
Linda and I were watching a broadcast of an interview with Yossi Klein Halevi, who we're both big fans of.
Me
And
too.
he was saying one of the most important things that Israel has to do right now is to show strength. He says that's what the enemy respects. And if we don't show strength, and this is part of what we're talking about here, they will see us as being vulnerable and the situation will get worse. And that's one of the reasons that Israel is being so aggressive with what they're doing. It's very important for their own confidence and for the rest of the world, especially the Arabic world, to see them defending themselves. So that's
And if I can just add one more line to that, and it's something that the West doesn't understand at all. It's something that Americans, especially those on the far left, peacenik progressives, cannot wrap their head around. That the only way for peace to exist in the Middle East is to show strength and not weakness. And I'm glad that you heard it. I'm glad that Yossi said it. I agree with you. And that sometimes means that we have to be the ones to move beyond what we think we're capable of doing in order to prove to ourselves. So, last comments, and then we're going to move to a completely different interpretation of this verse. One that focuses on this notion of, again, arev, surety and pledge. And this one I find to be fascinating. Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who you know is the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So he says, this is the first appearance of a kind of connection and responsibility of a broader sort. All Jews are responsible for each other. So the way he views this statement by Judah is not so much about overconfidence, arrogance, or foolishness, but rather an example for the first time in the Torah that makes a general statement. Every other Jewish person is my brother or sister, and my life, I am physically, emotionally, mentally responsible for their well-being. Right? A general principle that he is teasing out of this verse. What do you think about that?
I think that's true. I think that's very true. I mean, that goes back to that what you were talking about, the argument with God about in Sodom and Gomorrah about, how many people do you have to save? And my sense of it was that, you have to figure out what are you supposed to be doing in life? And Judah's taken on the mantle of, I'm supposed to be taking care of the family. I mean, he learned from the Joseph incident, no, I got to take care of the family. So I'm going to take care of Benjamin. I'm going to take care of all the rest of them. And I think that's a really powerful argument, completely consistent with the notion that all Jews are responsible for each other. And I love that, because I think that's, we really do have to figure out what are we willing to die for? What are we willing to live for? Even if we don't think we can succeed, even if we don't think we've got the power to do it, we still have to go in there and do it. How do we do that? We do that with God's help, and that's how we get the power to do it ultimately.
Yeah, I think about all of those Israeli soldiers, these young kids, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, who go into war with the entire country of Israel and all Jews everywhere in their mind,
Yep.
in their consciousness. I'm not going to battle just to defend myself or my family. I'm going into battle to be victorious for Israel and for Jews everywhere. That is so powerful. And you asked the question, Eileen, like, why are we here? What is our purpose in life? And is our purpose in life to say, I am responsible for another, for every other? Jack, you seem like you were ready to say something.
Well, I was thinking this about this in the context of the Akedah, where Avraham says nothing and is about to kill his son because he thinks that's what God is telling him to do. And I wonder if, Judah makes this pledge to protect Benjamin in a way that, he doesn't even know if he can, but he's going to try. And I just was curious about the kind of dichotomy between the two reactions, whether and I understand that Judah's not hearing from God or the way Avraham is, but it just makes you wonder that Avraham is willing to just sacrifice his own kid without even a hint of any disagreement, and yet now a couple generations later we have Judah who's willing to basically sacrifice anything to protect Benjamin.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I don't have a simple answer for Abraham's behavior. There are all sorts of philosophical and theological explanations for Abraham, and then there are those who say he miserably failed in that moment by not stepping up and standing forth. And I guess what we might say is, at our best, we're inconsistent human beings. And sometimes we feel the power and the ability to rise to the occasion and beyond. And at other times, for whatever reason, we fall short and then have to live with the consequences of falling short. And I don't have a better answer than that. But a really good question, an important question. Kathleen.
I've always struggled with that, and I don't know if you want to go into that now, but Abraham lived in a society where people were sacrificing their children, their sons, and he'd already sent Ishmael away. He was used to going without. But even in the text, it says, we will come back. He tells the people, and he makes another future-oriented thing about his son. And so maybe the lesson is what Sachs had said, is that how do you live with uncertainty when God's predictions don't seem to be coming true? Because he lived with uncertainty about everything else. So he lived with uncertainty. How was he going to have a great nation? He was promised like 4 or 5 times or more, and no children. So God is saying maybe we have to live with uncertainty, and we still have to maintain our faith.
Nice, very nice. Even in the face of uncertainty, like it's kind of like what Rob said earlier. The pitcher only has control over the pitcher. He doesn't have control over his outfielders. He doesn't have control over the catcher. He doesn't have control over Andrew Friedman, who's sticking his nose into every decision that Dave Roberts is making. He only has control. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate the fact that you like that one. Right? You're right. We live with uncertainty and doubt all the time. And yet, can we still also, even in the uncertainty, be certain of our role, of what we can do, of how we can help and contribute to the well-being of others? George.
Yeah, okay, just a comment, and I want to get into something else. You also don't have control over the hitter. You may give your best pitch, and the guy still gets a home run. That can happen too. There's not, or you can get a bad pitch, and he may miss it or foul it or something. But responsible for one another. This is because in the war right now, okay, you've got a responsibility to eliminate Hamas, because they're evil and they're a danger and they're going to keep doing this stuff. On the other hand, to ransom a prisoner is another thing. But it also says in the Talmud, you're not supposed to overpay. In
And
other
look,
words, so you got conflicting things, although to me, win the war, hope you can save the prisoners, but if you want to save the prisoners, you're just going to go round and round again, if that's your whole thing.
yeah,
However
look,
many may still be alive, who knows,
there's no question that Israel learned its lesson by getting
Yeah.
Gilad Shalit for
Yeah,
1,000
Yeah,
criminals, one of them
they
being
overpaid,
Sinwar.
I mean,
True.
it's terrible to be a prisoner. I'm not saying, but so you got to weigh this thing. It's not a clear 100% one way or zero the other way.
True.
You know.
Let's keep going a little bit because
Sure.
Schneerson actually moves in a very, very interesting direction beyond this notion of responsibility, or he narrows the understanding of responsibility in a very particular way. And I find it to be fascinating, and I want to share it with you. So Rabbi Schneerson continues his same commentary. Just remember, let's go back for a second. He says, this is the first appearance of a kind of connection and responsibility of a broader sort. All Jews are responsible for each other. Are you familiar with the phrase Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Lazeh?
Yeah.
Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Lazeh. Literally, that means every Jew is responsible for every other Jew. It's a very famous line from the Talmud. And that's what Schneerson is bringing in. And it's because it's the same Hebrew word, arev. Kol Yisrael Aravim, Ayin Resh Bet. It's the same verb. Every Jew is responsible. But now look what he does with it. Where does he go? He says, the mitzvah of reproof, right, rebuke, is also based on this principle of interdependence, that we're responsible for one another. By what right do you rebuke another? The sages taught, surely rebuke him even 100 times with fire and determination without end or limit. By what right? Yet the sages also said, why have you set about conquering your fellow's fortress? Have you conquered your own? Let me just give you a brief understanding of what's going on here. So there's a passage in Leviticus that says we are obligated to offer rebuke to another human being when we see them doing something wrong. And the sages of the Talmud say even 100 times, right? If I see George, I'm going to pick on you, George, for a second. If I see George doing something wrong and I go up to him and I say, George, stop picking on Eileen, right? And George ignores me. I have to 100 times keep bothering George to stop doing what he's doing. Even if George says to me, who do you think you are? You were picking on Linda earlier today. So leave me out of it, right? I want to pick on Eileen. You were picking on Linda. In other words, you don't have your own house in order. That's the response, right? When we rebuke somebody, that person comes back to us and says, why are you rebuking me? You got your own problems. Despite that, we still have this obligation. He continues, the justification for and the obligation to reprove others rests in mutual interdependence. All Jews are responsible for one another. Our meaning of the root, ayin resh bet, is sweet. Jews are sweet, pleasant one to another, imbued with love and fellowship one for the other. When one reproves another, it is because they are concerned one for another out of a sense of love. So we don't rebuke somebody because we don't like that person. We rebuke somebody because we care so deeply about that person. It's an expression of our love for them. not the other way around. Arev also has a sense of mixture, being mixed together one with the other in the sense of partnership. Each Jew holds some piece that belongs to another. This is certainly true in the spiritual sense of the whole of the people of Israel. Each person holds some part that belongs to, in the verse, you stand here today, all of you before Adonai your God, in a collective partnership. In each Jew there exists some aspect of your heads, your elders, your hewers of wood, your drawers of water. And you who cleave to Adonai your God, all of you are alive today, all of you, which means that your connection to God makes you into a whole unified body, one unit. Klal Yisrael, the body of Israel, is embracing and all-inclusive. This is the foundation of the writing obligation to reprove. Its foundation is in the mutual responsibility of one Jew for another. Your servant has pledged himself for the boy. So he's saying a couple of very interesting things here if you followed it. One thing he's saying is, when you have a child who does something wrong and you rebuke that child maybe for two reasons. One is because you want your child to behave properly and you're not happy with the behavior of that child. And two, because there's a little bit of you in that child. And when the child does something wrong, it's not just a reflection of the child, it's a reflection of you. That's what he's saying here. What he's saying is there is a little bit of everybody else in me, which makes me want to make sure that they do the right thing, and which makes me make sure they want to do the right thing because it's a reflection on me if they do the wrong thing. Now, I get that with my child. It's much harder for me to get that if Eileen does something wrong. How is if Eileen doing something wrong a reflection of me personally, Richard Camrus? But Schneerson is saying it is a reflection of me because there's a little bit of Eileen in me, and there's a little bit of me and Eileen, because we're all connected. While we live in a world in which it looks like everybody is distinct and unique, we all come from the same source, God. Everything that's created in this world comes from that same moment. It's kind of like in physics, the Big Bang. Everything that exists in the universe comes from that minuscule atom or whatever it is, that smallest particle of existence that created the vast universe that we live in. And so too, every human being is separate and one at the same time. And therefore, when you do something wrong, right, it impacts me physically, emotionally, spiritually. And therefore, I have an obligation to fix that. It raises the game. It raises the bar when it comes to what it means to rebuke another human being. Doesn't it? And it says, when we think Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh B'zeh, all Jews are obligated to one another, we don't normally think about that in the realm of rebuke. We think that in the realm of all sorts of other areas, charity, for example, feeding the feeding the hungry, taking care of the homeless, making a minyan for another human being, right? Supporting somebody, picking them up at the airport, whatever it is. Those are the things we typically think of, not so much rebuke. That also is our obligation. Kathleen.
But the story illustrates that too, because I can't remember who it was, but I think it was Reuben, who, when there was Joseph in the last portion, said to the brothers, he rebuked the brothers, that it wasn't really a full atonement, you're only doing that because you're in the same circumstance. But
That's
you're
right.
not- You're not taking full responsibility. He kind of goes through that with them.
Yep, yep, great example, great example. Well, I know that was a lot to hold on to today. There's both the sense of holding ourselves up greater than we imagine, and the responsibility that we have to others. And I think they can be related. If we had more time, I would show how the first discussion that we had and this second discussion that we didn't have a whole lot of time for actually fit nicely together, in terms of challenging us to be the very best we can be in relationship to every other human being that comes into our existence. But that'll be for another day for next year when we study this Parsha again.
Do we have to wait that long? No, I think that would be great. I wish we could settle it in because now we've started it.
Yeah.
But thank you for being back with us. I really appreciated having you back.
Well, I've missed it for whatever reason. I don't know why I wasn't here the last few weeks, and I'm not going to be here next week because I'm out of town. But I always look forward to learning with you all because it's just such richness on in both regards. So thank you and have a good rest of your day and a good Shabbat. And I will hopefully see you all soon.
Bye-bye. Shabbat shalom.
Take
Shabbat
care.
shalom.